You are still with Fortunatus Onuh, and in this presentation, we are going to look at the concept of civilization. The concept of civilization and Africa. The concept of early civilization and Africa. A lot of persons have, or a lot of historians and schools of thought have wrongly looked at Africa as a dark continent. Well, unfortunately, some people bought this negative inscription about Africa. But the truth remains that Africa was never a dark continent, has never been a dark continent, notwithstanding the fact that Africa suffered some level of interruptions which desire to be corrected in the present time. In the history of the world, the earliest known civilization has been traced to Africa. Africa, as a matter of fact, is the cradle of humanity. The only place, or the earliest place in the whole world where the remains of what is believed to be the oldest human beings were discovered. And this says a lot about Africa. Some writers have tried to enshrine negative information about Africa. Well, I will not fully accuse all of them of doing it because they want to let down the Negroes, which most Africans are, the blacks. But I will say that some of them wrote their contents, the period, based on the availability of information they had. Some of the concept of this information happen to be one of the things that actually work on writers or authors are mainly the personality of the writer and also the belief of the writer. Another thing was the materials available to the writer, and also the current opinion as at the time the writer was documenting. And if you look at most of the historic contents that were developed during the colonial period, there were negative infusions from the pro-European writers, because the Europeans tend to believe that nothing good could come from Africa unless from external sources. This I have explained, or I even presented it in many times in my former content, mainly on the area of origin of some ethnic groups in Africa. You see somebody bringing in infusions that their origin is from places outside Africa or outside the area. Mainly, most of the ethnic groups in West African continent or West African subcontinent. But well, globally, we have three major civilizations, which African civilization is the oldest. We have the traditional African civilization, which was sound. We have the Oriental civilization, and the newest of them was actually the Western civilization. The oldest was the traditional African civilization, which was a source of knowledge, a source of civilization to other areas. Well, the Oriental civilization, which can be looked upon, we can call it Asia-based civilization, was a little bit closer to Africa in terms of influence and period of influence, basically. The Western civilization was somehow younger when it compared to other civilizations. But unfortunately, the transatlantic slave trade and other developments in Africa disrupted African civilization, disrupted Africanism, disrupted the cultural values of Africa, thereby bringing in a lot of confusions here and there. Africans had their own architectural designs. Africans had their own way of life. Africans had their own method of dressing, languages, uh, building of territories, and everything. It might interest you to know that when Europeans visited an empire like the Benin Empire, they saw well-developed urban structures. They saw streets well designed by the Obas. They saw a well-constructed Benin wall, which was to serve as a protective object against the power or the seat of the Oba. This civilization were not taken from outside Africa. But unfortunately, Africa suffered a lot, mainly on the transatlantic slave trade. Able-bodied men and women that were supposed to sustain African cultural growth were taken away from Africa. It might interest you to know that over 10 million Africans were moved from Africa to the New World and to Europe during the period or the centuries, the years of the transatlantic slave trade. Well, the debate of the transatlantic slave trade is for another day. It's unfortunate that most people tend to misinform even Africans about their developmental capacity. Yes, there are some cultural activities, engagement in Africa that were not good. But the same thing can be said about other areas in the world. Let me let you know this. Now, one of the worst place to keep a slave in the history was in Europe. Slaves were treated mainly as materials, not even human beings. Europeans, at the time, were enslaving their people, enslaving white people at that period, and they were treated as materials. But in Africa, slavery wasn't as tough, as bad as it was in Europe. Slaves were able to buy off their freedom. Slaves were able to integrate to the culture or the place where they lived. So it is not completely bad. Well, I know someone will say, if all these things were true, what's happening now? I wouldn't like to go into that debate because we have issues and we hope we get them correct or we get them corrected. Another thing that might interest you to know, that's one of the earliest civilizations in the world is Egyptian civilization. And some persons have tried to say that it was externally brought into Africa. But that is a wrong notion. Researchers have shown that those civilizations in Egypt were not brought from outside. And let me also give you this information that the earliest people to have lived in the area known today as Egypt were blacks. Before external forces, Arabian forces, and some European elements started coming into that area. And some displacements were conducted. And some people tend to hide the fact that some blacks, Nubians, ruled that region for a good number of years. Unfortunately, some people tend to attempt to wipe out that part of history. But the fact remains the fact. The evidences are there. So when somebody comes to look down on things in Africa, we should have the right information. Well, the present situation will be debated another day. Please subscribe to our channel. and click on the notification so that anytime we drop a new content, you'll be one of the earliest people to be notified. Thanks for being part of the presentation today. I still remain Fortunatus Onuh.